Good evening, Namaste. So today I welcome you all to another Friday session of Indian section of the Theosophical Society, and we are continuing the session on the part 4 of the letters Vibhaji has been taking for the last 3 sessions. So I don't need to introduce Vibhaji. Everybody knows her as a speaker, as a national speaker, as a very good orator, and she explains things so smoothly and simply. So over to you, Vibhaji, after I do the universal prayer. Okay. O hidden life, vibrant in every atom. O hidden light, shining in every creature. O hidden love, embracing all in oneness. May each who feels himself as one with thee know he is also one with every other. Come back. So we are doing letter number 69, 70 ABC, part 4. Over to you, Vibhaji.
Thank you very much, Subralina, and namaste. Good evening to all of you. And today, this will be the concluding part of letter number 70, A, B, and C. We know letter number 70 was the questions from Hume, which he wrote to Master KH. That was letter 70A. Letter 70B were the questions which AP Senate had written to HPB. And then Mahatma Ji replied to both of them in letter number 70C. So that is, we are taking it in question answer format, so not going sequentially. And before we begin today's session, I will just summarize what we did in the part 3. So in this part 3, Mahatma Ji mentioned very clearly that the spiritual ego, that means spiritual ego is the monad, the Atma Buddhi, and individual ego, that is Atma Buddhi Manas. So this is a distinction between spiritual ego and individual ego. Individual ego is also called personal ego. Okay. So the spiritual ego, that is immortal. It never perishes. But immortality for the personal ego, that is conditional. So this is a great difference. I wonder how many of us knew it already. Immortality for the personal ego, which is Atma Buddhi Manas, that is conditional. Now, why it is conditional? Because we have seen how if a lot of bad karma is accumulated, then that individual can go into the state of avicci and he can be annihilated. Okay, so then there is no immortality. That is why personal ego is conditional. And this was the confusion which Senate had, that how immortality can be conditional, but immortality is conditional only for personal ego. For spiritual ego, that will never perish. Then he also mentioned that true co-workers with natures, they are the adepts. But sorcerers are also co-workers of nature. They partner with nature in evil. And this allows them to bend her hand. That means use her laws for gaining pan-ionic immortality. In the state of avicci, they are not annihilated, they remain immortal. But that is preferable to getting annihilated. This is what Master says. What is the use of being immortal in evil? It is so bad. Hume's argument was that in the seance room, the phenomena were largely due to spirits and not shells. And he wrote long questions about it. Spirits of suicide and spirits of accident victims, because they die prematurely, they must remain on earth till their appointed hour of death. But Mahatma Ji says that such entities, though they may be present in the seance room, but they are separated from their higher principles by a gulf. And who are the thinking principles? They are the higher principles, not the lower. So if there is a separation between the higher principles by a gulf, it means that the sixth and seventh principle, it remains passive and negative for those suicide or accident victims. Therefore, they cannot communicate intelligently in the seance room. And the victims of accident, their lower principles also become dormant because they are attracted by the higher. And such egos who have met with accident, they have already received the effect of their karma because they met with an accident. So it is receiving the effects of their karma, and therefore they are free now. And for such egos, the Dhyan Chohans, they protect them. And the initiates who are on the path to adeptship, they learn this through personal experience. Then all kinds of accident victims, whether they are good or bad, they remain asleep. But they will awaken at the appointed hour when the higher and lower principles have to separate. And when the higher principles, they have to go into gestation. At that time, they wake up. So then the higher principles go into gestation. After gestation, they have to again wake up in Devachan. But because it was an accident, so their lifespan must have been so short that there is not sufficient good karma to allow them to wake up in Devachan. So in such cases, they immediately incarnate again upon the earth without having any Devachanic period. Therefore, Mahatma Ji says it is clear that in the seance room, shells will be many, spirits will be few. Again and again, he's trying to explain to Hume that in the seance room, it is all phenomena of shells, not of spirits. But Hume still thinks that there is no difference between suicide case and victims of accident. Both are ultimately untimely death. So he thinks both must result in disembodied spirits who will communicate in the seance room. He's still arguing with the same questions. So this is what we completed in part 3. Now we will continue part 4 and I will share my slides with you. So we have completed slide number 39 and I think Meenakshi ji is here with us today. So after slide 39, we'll continue today. Yes, so this was Hume's question that the physical phenomena of spiritualist ought apparently to be due to the spirits and not the shells. And he wants further information on this. Because he thinks that there is no difference between the accident victims and the suicide victims. So what Mahatma Ji says to this, his answer is given in letter number 70C. There is a great difference in our humble opinion. So he's referring to the suicide victims and accident victims. There is a great difference in our humble opinion. We who look at it from a standpoint which would prove very unacceptable to life insurance companies say that there are very few, if any, of the men who indulge in the above enumerated vices, who feel perfectly sure that such a course of action will lead them eventually to premature death. Such is the penalty of Maya. The vices will not escape their punishment, but it is the cause, not the effect, that will be punished, especially an unforeseen though probable effect. So humorously, he is also referring to life insurance companies. What he means here is that the suicide victims, they knowingly commit suicide. Naturally, the insurance company is not going to pay if there is a suicide case, life insurance companies. So suicide victims, they have knowingly committed the act, whereas accidental victims are just that, they are accidents. But even people who indulge in vices, for example, like a person is taking drugs or a person is consuming too much alcohol. Now, everybody knows that in such cases, the liver will go bad or something will happen and that person may die. So this cannot be compared to suicide. Just because a person is taking alcohol and maybe later in life he dies, but that is not equivalent to suicide. This is as far as the law of retribution or law of karma is concerned. And so humorously, Mahatma Ji is adding that LIC companies, life insurance companies, they don't think so. If a person has died due to excessive alcohol consumption, they might say that it is not, they might consider that this is a voluntary or willful death. So they may not pay compensation. That's what he is trying to tell Hume. Okay. Further, he says, as well call a suicide a man who meets his death in a storm at sea, as one who kills himself with overstudy. Water is liable to drown a man, and too much brain work to produce a softening of the brain, which may carry him away. So this is very humorous. Like if a person can die due to some vice, like drinking excessive alcohol, so can he die if he is traveling by ship in a stormy sea? In such a case, no one ought to cross the Kalapani, nor even to take a bath for fear of getting faint in it and drowned in a bathtub. He may drown if he takes a bath. Nor should a man do his duty, least of all sacrifice himself for even a laudable and highly beneficent cause, as many of us, HPB for one, do. Would Mr. Hume call her a suicide were she to drop down dead over her present work? So Mahatma Ji is explaining that Hume's point of view is erroneous. People who die due to so many different causes, death due to vices cannot be considered suicide. Just because the person knew that indulging in that vice can kill him, like we mentioned, alcohol, tobacco, and any other vice. By that logic, he's saying that nobody should, nobody should travel by ship. Nobody should even work because there is a fear if you're using your brain too much, you might go mad, insane, or you could die. Nobody should even take a bath. You might drown in the bathtub. He goes further to say nobody should even exert themselves overtly in their line of duty. Is that the case? Just like Madame Blavatsky, we all know that she suffered from very poor health, but yet she continued. And with this work of the Mahatmas, she was even given an option that would she like to leave her body when she was very ill and then she moved to London. Her guru Mahatma M appeared to her. And then she decided that she would complete the work, she would complete secret doctrine. So the Mahatma Ji, he healed her body so that she could continue and complete that work. So here Mahatma KH is saying that does it mean that a person should not work because even by working they might die? So that is all very irrational, what Hume is mentioning. Further, he adds, motive is everything. Now, this is one of the most profound teachings in theosophy. We all know this. See, two people, they might perform the same task. Okay, but depending on what motive, by using what motive they perform the task, the effect of that karma or task which they perform, that will change. For example, see, if a person sees someone has dropped the wallet and he picks up and gives the wallet back to the owner, thinking that the owner will reward me. So that is the motive to get a reward. Okay. Another person may do the same thing because he thinks that is the right thing to do. So the motive is different. And therefore, the effect which both of them will receive, that will also be different. Moreover, and man is punished in a case of direct responsibility, never otherwise. That is in case of direct suicide, not like crossing a river or taking an airplane, a flight, which will cause death. Second point, in the victim's case, the natural hour of death was anticipated accidentally, while in that of the suicide, death is brought on voluntarily and with a full and deliberate knowledge of its immediate consequences. Thus, a man who causes his death in a fit of temporary insanity is not a fellows to the great grief and often trouble of the life insurance companies. Nor is he left a prey to the temptations of the Kamlok, but falls asleep like any other victim. So accident victims and victims of involuntary death, they are not punished by the law of karma. They fall into a state of dormancy, in a blissful sleep, and they are not subject to the temptations of Kamlok. After the physical body perishes, they are in the astral world, but they are in a state of dormancy. So Mahatma Ji is continuing the explanation why they are different, the cases of suicide and the cases of accident victims. A Guitian will not remain in the Earth's atmosphere with his higher principles over him inactive and paralyzed still there. Guitian is gone into a state during the period of which he will be ever firing at his president, thereby tossing into confusion and shuffling the destinies of millions of persons, where he will be ever tried and ever hung, bathing in the reflections of his deeds and thoughts, especially those he indulged in on the scaffold. His fate. So actually 2 lines from the original letter, they are missing at this point. Okay. So here Mahatma Ji is referring to one Charles Julius Guiteau. He was an American preacher and a writer and a lawyer, and he assassinated the 20th president of the United States, who was James Garfield. Then this person, Guiteau, he was convicted and he was hanged for his crime. So scaffold is the platform on which a criminal is hanged. He is executed by hanging. So such a criminal who gets death penalty. Now see, this is another case. Suicide victims, accident victims. And this, because someone has committed a crime, he will be knowingly receiving this death penalty. He is not killing himself willfully, but because of the law, he is going to be hanged. So what will happen in such a case? This case is not the same as an accident victim, nor is it same as suicide. Okay. So what will happen? This person who is a criminal and he has been convicted, he will relive the scenario over and over again. We have seen that when the physical body perishes at the last moment, the entire life, events of the entire life, they flash in across the inner eye of the person. So he sees them and he will relive that scenario over and over again with the same emotions of fear, pain, hatred, whatever are his last thoughts. And this itself becomes his punishment. So there are many cases which I have read. There was a soldier from the World War II and he actually died. It was a swampy area. And you see that there were many senior Theosophical Society members in the early days of the society who had this ability of consciously working in their astral body, and they helped the master in that. So in one of that, it is written that when he saw this person who was lying in the swamp, it was a soldier who was dead, but he did not know that he has died. And he was continuing in that state for years together. So then, okay, so then it goes on. So it happens like that. Now here in this case, the criminal who gets a death penalty, he relives those emotions. So even after his death, he has left his physical body, but he's still stuck in that loop, reliving that moment again and again. So this itself is his punishment. As for those who were knocked over by cholera or plague or jungle fever, they could not have succumbed had they not the germs for the development of such disease in them from birth. Now, germs of the disease from birth, it doesn't mean they have the germs of cholera disease from birth. It is an infectious, contagious disease. What this means is that from birth, they have the seeds of karma, the germs of that karma. So they must have done something. See, our life on earth, it is totally under this law of karma. Whatever situations we face in our life, somewhere, if not in this life, maybe in the previous, or maybe in many lives earlier, there must have been some cause which is bringing these consequences or situations today in our life. So that is called the seed or the germs. They are already there within the person, which is bearing this effect whenever the time comes, whenever the time is right. So if they are getting some disease, cholera, plague, or jungle fever, it is due to some causes created in the previous life. So then the great bulk of the physical phenomena of spiritualist, my dear brother, are not due to these spirits, but indeed due to shells. So Mahatma Ji is doing his best to explain to Hume that the truth is majority of the phenomena of seance rooms, they are due to shells and not spirits. I hope the difference between shells and spirits is very clear to all of you. Then, okay, so question from Hume continues. This is from letter 70A. There is a second point. Very often, as I understand, the spirits of very fair, average, good people dying natural deaths remain some time in the Earth's atmosphere, from a few days to a few years. Why cannot such as these communicate? And if they can, this is most important point that would not have been overlooked. So this is Hume's question. And okay, a valid question. Ordinary people, when they die, then immediately they don't go into gestation. They still remain in the Earth's atmosphere from a few days to a few years. So why is it not possible that such people or the such entities are present in seance room and they are communicating? So let us see what Mahatma Ji has to say for this. He says that the spirits of very fair, average, good people dying natural deaths remain in the Earth's atmosphere from a few days to a few years, the period depending on their readiness to meet their creature, not their creator. A very abstruse subject you will learn later on, when you too are more prepared. So actually Mahatma Ji has not given the explanation, saying that as you progress, as your understanding increases, your mental ability increases, then you will be told the reason. But this is a very intriguing phrase he has used. Readiness to meet their creature, not their creator. We can only speculate what it means. See, general Western thought was that after death, one meets God. God is the creator. And God weighs their actions, good or bad, and accordingly will condemn them to hell if they have been bad, or they will have eternal heaven. So this belief is erroneous. We know there is nothing like that after death. Nobody is condemned to eternal hell or eternal heaven. So after death, a person will meet his creature. It could mean, now see, this is just a thought. Mahatma Ji hasn't given any answer. But what we have learned in theosophy so far, that during our lifetime itself, through our thoughts, feelings, desires, we create these elementals on the astral plane, on the mental plane. So these could mean the creature that gets created. And these elementals, they persist if they are endowed with sufficient force. If you have very strong thoughts or very strong feelings, those entities which you yourself create, they do not perish because that force is still there in them. And after death, after physical death, the person, when he enters this astral world, all these elementals are attracted to him due to magnetic affinity because they were created by him. So perhaps the reference here is to such creatures, but this is just a speculation. Next slide, here Mahatma Ji is mentioning, but why should they communicate? Meaning the good people who die. Why should they communicate? Do those you love communicate with you during their sleep objectively? Your spirits in hours of danger or intense sympathy, vibrating on the same current of thought, which in such cases creates a kind of telegraphic spiritual wires between your two bodies, may meet and mutually impress your memories, but then you are living, not dead bodies. But how can an unconscious fifth principle, see supra, impress or communicate with a living organism, unless it has already become a shell? So as we mentioned earlier, that after death and after the life flashback that just while dying a person has, then consciousness leaves the person. As the consciousness is leaving, he has that flashback of his entire life, and then the consciousness leaves and the mind becomes unconscious. So the disembodied entity can have no communication at all with the people who are still living because mind is unconscious. Now, when we talk about telepathic communication, That works in case of living people only. And it happens by thought current. That is what Mahatma Ji has explained. Telegraphic spiritual wires between your two bodies. Because energy follows thought. About whomever you will think, that person is sure to receive those vibrations. Okay. So that happens between living persons only when the mind is active. And in this case, immediately after death, the mind is unconscious. So this principle cannot be applied to spirit of dead persons as their mind is unconscious. So they cannot have any thoughts. They cannot communicate intelligently in seance rooms. This is the reason. If for certain reasons they remain in such a state of lethargy for several years, the spirits of the living may ascend to them, as you were already told, and this may take place still easier than in Devachan, where the spirit is too much engrossed in his personal bliss to pay much attention to an intruding element. I say they cannot. I say they cannot means those people cannot, or those entities cannot communicate in the seance room. So what Mahatma Ji has mentioned here, that the unconscious disembodied spirits, they may remain in such a state for long years. That is true. Consciousness of living people, that means maybe their loved ones, their family members. So consciousness of the living people, it may ascend to the level of the entity which has died. That means to the astral level. Okay. So sometimes they have a dream that, oh, I communicated with the person who is now deceased. It is easier for their consciousness to ascend to astral plane rather than to ascend to devachanic plane. That is even more difficult because it is one level even above the astral. When the higher ego goes into devachan, it is too engrossed in the blissful state in devachan. Okay, so it's not going to communicate, but it may be possible for a very pure living family member who really loved the person who has died, for their consciousness also to go to the level of devachan, but that is very rare. Normally it goes to the astral level only. But the spirit of the deceased is not going to, in any circumstances, the spirit of the deceased person never ever descends to physical level to communicate. If any phenomena is seen, that is only the shell. Okay, so this must be very clearly understood. Now, okay, so this is again letter 70A, Hume's question. And thirdly, it is a fact that thousands of spirits do appear in pure circles and teach the highest morality. So he's still thinking spirits appear there and they teach the highest morality. And moreover, tell very closely the truths as to the unseen world. Witness Allan Kardec's book, pages and pages of which are identical with what you yourself teach. And it is unreasonable to suppose that such are either shells or bad spirits. But you have not given us any opening for any large number of pure high spirits. And until the whole theory is properly set forth and due place made for these, which seem to me a thoroughly well-established fact, you will never win over the spiritualist. So he's telling Mahatma Ji that you will never win over the spiritualist if you do not explain and tell about all these things. This was the last question that Hume wrote to Mahatma KH in his letter number 70A, because he was still not convinced about shells and he thought that the spirits communicate. And he's also thinking that Mahatma Ji has given only partial knowledge. So this is not going to convince any of the spiritualists. And what he is reiterating, that in pure circles of seance rooms, communication with pure high spirits is happening. It is taking place and the spirits are revealing higher truths. This author, Allan Kardec, he wrote books on spiritism, and to Hume his writings seem to concur with what? That means to be in accord with what Mahatma Ji is teaching. So he's talking about that person also, that author. So Mahatma Ji is really sorry to contradict Hume's statement. He says, I am sorry to contradict your statement. I know of no thousands of spirit who do appear in circles, and moreover positively do not know of one perfectly pure circle and teach the highest morality. Allan Kardec was not quite immaculate during his lifetime, nor has become a very pure spirit since. So this is a very important point. See, how the nature and character of a person was during his lifetime. So after his death, his surviving principles will remain of the same nature. Surviving principles will be his of astral and mental. They are going to have the same nature. They are not going to suddenly become purified to become like a pure angel or some, good high spirit. What was his nature during the life? The same nature remains even after death. And Allan Kardec, he was neither a pure character in his lifetime, nor he could have been after his death. This is what Mahatma Ji is telling you. Then Mahatma Ji continues to answer Hume's last question. As to the teaching, the highest morality, we have a Dugpa. Shamar, not far from where I am residing. Quite a remarkable man. Dugpa is a sorcerer. Quite a remarkable man. Not very powerful as a sorcerer, but excessively so as a drunkard. More than a sorcerer, he was a drunkard, a thief, a liar, and an orator. In this latter role, meaning as an orator, he could give points to and beat Messrs. Gladstone, Bradlaugh, and even Reverend H.W. Beecher, than whom there is no more eloquent preacher of morality. This Reverend H.W. Beecher, he was perhaps he was a priest in the church. So these people, they give their Sunday mass and they teach about morality. And he is qualified for that. But this Dugpa, he could even teach morality in a better way than all these people. Okay. And although he was also a drunkard and a liar and a thief. There is no more eloquent preacher of morality and no greater breaker of his Lord's commandments in the US. A lot of satire Mahatma Ji has in his letters. So we can see his sense of humor. So to illustrate his point about teaching morality, Mahatma Ji is giving the example of this Dugpa. He was a great orator, meaning a very good speaker, and he could preach very high morality, better than many of the others supposedly who were qualified to do so. And yet he himself was a sorcerer. So what he would do, let us see. This Shapa Tung Lama, when thirsty, can make an enormous audience of yellow-cap laymen weep all their yearly supply of tears with the narrative of his repentance and suffering in the morning, and then get drunk in the evening and rob the whole village by mesmerizing them into a dead sleep. Preaching and teaching morality with an end in view proves very little. Read JPT's article in Light, and what I say will be corroborated. So preaching morality is merely mouthing of words, which that Dugpa, Shapa Tung Lama could do. It does not imply that the person who is teaching morality is also of a very high moral character. And this was true of that Dugpa. He himself was such a drunkard that he could make men weep, meaning he would teach such high morality that his audience who are listening, they would think, contemplate about all the misdeeds that they have done, and they would start weeping. Tears would start coming from their eyes. But he himself, meaning that Dugpa himself, was of such a character. Morning he will teach morality, and evening he could mesmerize them because he was a sorcerer. They would go to sleep, and then he would go and rob them. So then Mahatma Ji addresses one last query from Senate. And so this query from Senate is in letter 70B. He asks, there is another difficulty here because some fifth rounders being here already, it is not clear when the obscuration comes on. Will it be behind the avant couriers of the fifth round who will not count as commencing the fifth? That epoch only really beginning after the existing race has totally decayed out. But this idea will not work. So this is on a totally different line, the question of Hume, but that is how Mahatma Ji has answered in his letter 70C. So that's why I have taken this question here. His question is that the planet, meaning the Earth, it will go into obscuration or dormancy at the end of every round. Round means that all the 7 globes, life wave will move across all the 7 globes. After the 7th globe, the round closes, and for an equivalent period, the planet remains in dormancy. Some 5th rounders, present round is our 4th round. But people who have developed their principles, which normally would have developed in the 5th round. So such 5th rounders, they are already present in our midst in the 4th round. We saw in, I think in some previous letter, Plato and some other people. Many of such 5th rounders are here. It is clear that the 5th round has not yet commenced. Senate is confused that when the obscuration will happen at the end of this our 4th round, then it will be after some people have already entered the 5th round, because the 5th round people have already come. And then obscuration is going to happen now after 4th round closes. So people from 5th round are already here, but the obscuration is happening for the closing of 4th round. So this is his confusion. To this, Mahatma Ji clarifies. Now, this is the last part of Mahatma Ji's letter. He says to Senate that the obscuration comes on only when the last man of whatever round has passed into the sphere of effects. Nature is too mathematically adjusted to cause mistakes to happen in the exercise of her functions. This we must keep in mind. The laws of nature are unerring. The obscuration of the planet on which are now evoluting the races of the 5th round men will, of course, be behind the few avant couriers who are now here. But before that time comes, we will have to part to meet no more as the editor of the Pioneer and this humble correspondent. So what this means that as per the law of nature, the obscuration will definitely happen at the end of 4th round, and after these few advanced men of the 5th round have already come. So yes, it will happen at the end of the 4th, and yes, also the few 5th rounders have already come. And a round is said to be complete only when the last man of that round, he completes his life on the last, that is the 7th globe, and enters the world of effects. Only then the 4th round will be considered to be complete and planet will go into obscuration. And no matter in between how many 5th rounders, they keep coming. Finally, he mentions, unless a man loves well or hates as well, he will be neither in Devachan nor in Avicii. Nature spews the lukewarm out of her mouth, means only that she annihilates their personal egos, not the shells, nor yet the 6th principle. 6th principle is Buddhi. Not the shells, nor yet the 6th principle in the Kamlok and the Devachan. This does not prevent them from being immediately reborn, and if their lives were not very, very bad, there is no reason why the eternal monad should not find the page of that life intact in the book of life. So this is a reference again to, you remember we began this letter with reference to Eliphas Levi's article, which was printed in the Theosophist of October 1881. Mahatma Ji already mentioned that love and hate are the immortal forces, the only immortal forces. And depending upon the proportion of the good force, that means the force of love, the ego of the deceased person may enter into Devachan, because Devachan is an effect of the good karma. It is a blissful period. And if the bad or evil forces are too high, then the person goes into the state of Avicii. So these are like polar states, Avicii and Devachan. Good karma, go to Devachan. Bad karma, go to Avicii. But in extreme cases, like extreme bad karma, then Avicii. Okay. So lukewarm. So lukewarm means if both the good and the bad forces are low, the person was neither very, very, very good, nor was he very extremely bad, then there is not sufficient karma either to put him in Devachan or to put him in Avicii. So these are the lukewarm egos. They neither go to Devachan nor to Avicii, and nature spews them out, meaning they are removed from the world of effects and the ego has to be reborn immediately. Okay, the gestation period will be there definitely, and then the ego will be reborn. This is the meaning of nature is spewing them out. So with this, we complete the letter. This is the end of the letter of Mahatma Ji 70C. And so I will stop sharing the screen. And I think Meenakshi Ji is here with us today. Namaste, Meenakshi Ji. Yes.
Namaste.
I request you to give us the translation. Today we have began from slide number 40. So from that onwards. Okay.
थैंक यू सभी को प्रणाम और धन्यवाद आपको सिस्टर। आपको मेरी आवाज सुनाई दे रही है? क्या आपको मेरी आवाज सुनाई दे रही है?
Yes, yes, yes.
लेटर नंबर 78 बी और सी की श्रृंखला में यह आखिरी पार्ट है। ह्यूम का क्वेश्चन है, आत्महत्याएं चाहे वे जाने या अनजाने हो, चाहे वह मनुष्य अपना भेजा उड़ा दे या शराब पिए या खुद को मौत के घाट उतारे या अत्यधिक अध्ययन से खुद को मारे, इससे क्या फर्क हो सकता है? प्रत्येक मामले में सामान्यतः प्राकृतिक मृत्यु के समय का अनुमान लगाया जा सकता है और परिणाम स्वरूप यह शेल नहीं बल्कि स्पिरिट है। या फिर किसी व्यक्ति को हत्या के आरोप में फांसी दी जाती है, या शुद्ध या युद्ध में, ट्रेन में या विस्फोट में मारे जाते हैं, या डूब के या जलने से मरते हैं, या कॉलेरा या प्लेग या जंगल फीवर से, या हजारों ऐसी महामारियों में से किसी एक से मरा हो जो उसके क्षेत्र में पहले से नहीं थी, लेकिन उसके किसी विशिष्ट स्थान में जाने के कारण वहां लाई गई हो, जिससे वह बच सकता था। इससे क्या फर्क होगा? इन सभी मामलों में समान रूप से मृत्यु के सर्वसाधारण समय का अंदाजा होता है और परिणामतः शेल के बजाय स्पिरिट होता है। इंग्लैंड में यह अनुमान लगाया गया है कि 15% आबादी अपनी प्राकृतिक मृत्यु की अवधि तक नहीं पहुंचती, और बुखार और अकाल और उसके उपरांत परिणामों का क्या? मुझे डर है कि यहाँ भी प्राकृतिक मृत्यु का दर बहुत बड़ा नहीं है, जहाँ ज्यादातर लोग शाकाहारी हैं और अस्वच्छ प्रतिकूल स्थितियों में रहते हैं। तो फिर अध्यात्मवादियों के सभी भौतिक घटनाओं में से बड़ी मात्रा प्रमुखतः इन आत्माओं से होनी चाहिए, न कि शेल्स द्वारा। इस पर मास्टर उत्तर देते हैं, हमारे विचार में बहुत अंतर है। हम जो इसे एक ऐसे नजरिए से देखते हैं जो जीवन बीमा कंपनियों के लिए बहुत ही अस्वीकार्य होगा। हम कहते हैं कि ऊपर दर्शाए गए दोषों में लिप्त होने वाले मनुष्यों में से बहुत कम ऐसे हैं जो पूरी तरह से आश्वस्त है कि इस तरह की करतूत उन्हें अंततः अकाली मृत्यु की ओर ले जाएगी। इस प्रकार माया का दंड होता है। दुराचार अपनी सजा से नहीं बचता, लेकिन यह कार्य कारण है, न कि प्रभाव जिसे दंडित किया जाएगा, विशेषतः अनपेक्षित हालांकि संभावित प्रभाव। साथ ही एक मनुष्य जो समुद्र के तूफान में मरता है या कोई अत्यधिक अध्ययन से स्वयं को मारता है, उन्हें चाहे आत्महत्या कहे। पानी एक मनुष्य को डुबा सकता है और बहुत अधिक दिमागी काम दिमाग को मंद करता है, जिससे वह बहक सकता है। ऐसे में किसी को भी काला पानी को पार नहीं करना चाहिए और न ही उसमें इस डर से नहाना चाहिए कि वह बेहोश होकर कहीं डूब न जाए, क्योंकि इस तरह के मामलों के बारे में हम सभी जानते हैं। न ही किसी व्यक्ति ने सराहनीय और बहुत ही कल्याणकारी कार्य के लिए भी स्वयं को समर्पित करना चाहिए, बल अपना कर्तव्य निभाना नहीं चाहिए, जैसे एचपीवी सहित हम सब करते हैं। यदि एचपीवी अपने वर्तमान कार्य करते हुए मर जाती है, तो क्या मिस्टर ह्यूम उसे आत्महत्या कहेंगे? हेतु ही सब कुछ है और मनुष्य को अपनी कृति में दंडित किया जाता है, कृति से दंडित किया जाता है, अन्यथा कभी। विक्टिम यानी आपदा के शिकार के मामले में मृत्यु के नैसर्गिक समय का आकस्मिक रूप से अनुमान लगाया गया था, जबकि आत्महत्या के मामले में मृत्यु को स्वेच्छा से और उसके तत्काल परिणामों के सोचे समझे पूर्ण जानकारी के साथ लाया जाता है। इस तरह एक मनुष्य जो क्षणिक विक्षिप्तता के आवेश में अपनी मृत्यु का कारण बनता है, वह अक्सर जीवन बीमा कंपनियों के दुख और परेशानियों के लिए आत्महत्या नहीं है, न ही उसे कामलोक के प्रलोभनों के शिकार के लिए छोड़ा जाता है, बल्कि अन्य विक्टिम की तरह निद्रस्त हो जाता है। निष्क्रिय और शक्तिहीन उच्च तत्वों सहित ग्यूट्यू के जैसे, जिसने अमेरिका के 20th प्रेसिडेंट की हत्या की थी और जिसे फांसी की सजा सुनाई गई थी, वह पृथ्वी की कक्षा में नहीं रहेंगे। ग्यूट्यू एक ऐसी स्थिति में चला गया है जिसकी कालावधि के दौरान वह सदा अपने प्रेसिडेंट के ऊपर गोली चलाएगा, जिससे लाखों लोग संभ्रमित हो जाएंगे और उनके भवितव्य में फेरबदल होगा, जहां उस पर सदा मुकदमा चलेगा और सदा फांसी होगी। अपने कर्मों और विचारों के प्रतिच्छाया में वह सदा रहेगा। विशेष रूप से फांसी के तख्त पर वह जिनसे जूझा था, यह उसकी तकदीर है। जो लोग कॉलेरा या प्लेग या जंगल फीवर से गुजर गए, यदि उनमें जन्म से ही ऐसी बीमारियों के बढ़ने वाले कर्म के जीवाणु नहीं होते, तब वे उसके चपेट में आकर मरते नहीं। इस तरह मेरे प्रिय बंधु, अध्यात्मवादियों की ज्यादातर भौतिक घटनाएं इन आत्माओं से नहीं बल्कि शेल्स के कारण है। आगे का प्रश्न ही उनका है। दूसरा मुद्दा यह है कि बहुतांश अनेक ऐसे औसतन अच्छे लोग जिनकी प्राकृतिक मृत्यु होती है, जैसे कि मैं समझता हूँ, उनकी आत्मा कुछ काल के लिए, कुछ दिनों से लेकर कुछ वर्षों तक पृथ्वी के वातावरण में रहती है। ऐसी आत्माएं संपर्क क्यों नहीं करती? और यदि वे ऐसा करती है, तब यह सबसे महत्वपूर्ण बात है जिसे नजरअंदाज नहीं किया जाना चाहिए था। इस पर मास्टर आंसर देते हैं। प्राकृतिक मृत्यु से मरने वाले औसतन बहुत अच्छे लोगों की आत्माएं पृथ्वी के वातावरण में कुछ दिनों से लेकर कुछ वर्षों तक रहती है। यह कालावधि उनके निर्मित एलिमेंटल से मिलने की, न कि उनके निर्माता से मिलने की तत्परता पर निर्भर करती है। यह बहुत ही क्लिष्ट विषय है जिसे आप बाद में सीखेंगे, जब आप भी और अधिक लायक होगे तब। लेकिन उन्होंने संवाद क्यों साधना चाहिए, संपर्क क्यों करना चाहिए? क्या आप जिनसे स्नेह करते हैं, क्या वे अपनी नींद के दौरान आपसे संपर्क करते हैं? संकट के दौरान या अत्यधिक दया भावना के दौरान आपकी आत्माएं समान विचार प्रवाह में कंपन करती है। ऐसी स्थिति में आप दोनों के शरीरों के बीच एक प्रकार के समाचार भेजने के आत्मिक तार बनते हैं। वे विचार तरंग मिल सकते हैं और आपकी याददाश्त को पारस्परिक रूप से प्रभावित कर सकते हैं, लेकिन तब आप दोनों जीवित हो, न कि मृत। लेकिन ऊपर दर्शित अचेतन पांचवा तत्व कैसे एक जीवित प्राणी को प्रभावित कर सकता है या संवाद साध सकता है, जब तक कि वह पहले से ही एक शेल न बन गया हो? यदि कुछ कारणवश वे कई वर्षों तक इसी निष्क्रिय स्थिति में रहते हैं, तब जैसे कि आपको पहले ही बताया जा चुका है, जीवित लोगों की आत्माएं उन तक पहुंच सकती है और यह देवाचन की तुलना में और भी आसानी से हो सकता है, जहां आत्मा अपने निजी आनंद में इतनी अधिक तल्लीन रहती है कि किसी आगंतुक की ओर उसका ध्यान न जाए। मैं कहता हूं वे ऐसा नहीं कर सकते। आगे का प्रश्न सीनेट का है, ह्यूम का है। और तीसरी बात, यह सच है कि आध्यात्मिक सभा मंडली में यानी प्योर सर्कल्स में हजारों आत्माएं प्रकट होती है और उच्चतम नैतिकता की शिक्षा प्रदान करती है और साथ ही अदृश्य जगत की सच्चाई के बारे में सटीकता से बताते हैं। एलन कार्डेक की किताब में अनेक पन्नों में पढ़ा है जो आपकी शिक्षाओं के समान है, और यह मानना अनुचित होगा कि यह या तो शेल्स है या बुरी आत्माएं हैं। लेकिन आपने हमें बड़ी मात्रा में जो शुद्ध पवित्र आत्माएं हैं उनके बारे में खुलासा नहीं किया है, और जब तक इस संपूर्ण सिद्धांत को ठीक तरह से प्रस्थापित नहीं किया जाता, जो मुझे अडिग तथ्य प्रतीत होता है, तब तक आप अध्यात्मवादियों पर विजय नहीं पाओगे। इस पर मास्टर उत्तर देते हैं, मुझे आपके कथन का विरोध करने में खेद है। मैं ऐसी हजारों आत्माओं के बारे में नहीं जानता जो सभा मंडली में अवतरित होती है और उच्चतम नैतिक शिक्षा प्रदान करती है, और न ही मैं ऐसे किसी पूरी तरह से प्योर सर्कल यानी परफेक्टली निर्मल लोगों की मंडली को जानता हूँ। अपने जीवन काल में एलन कार्डेक बिल्कुल ही निष्कलंक नहीं थे और न ही वे तब से शुद्धतम बने। जहां तक उच्चतम नैतिकता की शिक्षा देने का सवाल है, हमारे यहाँ एक शमार दुप्पा है जो मेरे निवास स्थान से अधिक दूर नहीं रहता है, जो बहुत ही विलक्षण है। वह एक काले जादूगर सॉर्सरर के रूप में बहुत सामर्थ्यशाली नहीं है, लेकिन एक बड़ा शराबी, चोर, झूठा है और अच्छा वक्ता है। एक वक्ता के रूप में वह मेसर्स ग्लैडस्टोन, ब्रैडलॉ और यहाँ तक कि रेवरन H.W. बीचर को भी उपदेश दे सकता है और उन्हें हरा सकता है। यह शापाटू लामा जब प्यासा होता है, तब वह सुबह के समय येलो कैप वाले सामान्य जनों के विशाल श्रोतागणों को अपने पश्चाताप और पीड़ा की गाथा सुनाकर उन्हें संपूर्ण वर्ष के अश्रुओं से रुला सकता है, और फिर शाम को नशे में धुत होकर गहरी नींद ले रहे संपूर्ण गांव को सम्मोहित करके उन्हें लूटता है। आगे सीनेट का क्वेश्चन है, यहाँ एक और कठिनाई है, क्योंकि यहाँ पहले से ही कुछ फिफ्थ राउंडर्स होने के कारण ग्रह की प्रच्छन्नता कब आती है यह समझ नहीं रहा है। क्या यह 5वें राउंड के पूर्वगामियों के या अग्रगामियों के बाद में होगा, जो 5वें राउंड को आरंभ करने के रूप में गिना नहीं जाएगा। मौजूदा रेस के पूरी तरह से समाप्त होने के बाद ही वह युग वास्तव में शुरू होता है, लेकिन यह विचार काम नहीं करेगा। इस पर मास्टर आंसर देते हैं, ग्रह की प्रच्छन्नता तभी आती है जब किसी भी राउंड का आखिरी व्यक्ति प्रभाव के स्फीयर में प्रवेश कर चुका होता है। प्रकृति बहुत अच्छी तरह से, बहुत गणितीय रूप से समायोजित है ताकि उसकी गतिविधियों में गलतियां न हो सके। जिस ग्रह पर अभी 5वें राउंड के मनुष्यों की रेस शील है, उसकी प्रच्छन्नता निश्चित ही कुछ अग्रगामियों के बाद में होगी जो अब यहाँ है, लेकिन इससे पहले कि वह समय आए, हमें पायोनियर के संपादक और उसके अदने से पत्र व्यवहारी के रूप में और कभी मिलना नहीं होगा और जुदा होना होगा, कभी न मिलने के लिए जुदा होना होगा। जब तक कोई व्यक्ति अच्छी तरह से प्रेम या नफरत नहीं करता, तब तक वह न तो देवाचर में होगा और न ही अविची में। नेचर स्प्यूज द lukewarm आउट ऑफ हर माउथ। इसका अर्थ केवल इतना है कि वह कामलोक और देवाचर में उनके पर्सनल इगोस को मिटाती है। यह उन्हें तुरंत पुनर्जन्म लेने से नहीं रोकता है, और यदि उनका जीवन बहुत अधिक बुरा नहीं था, तब अमर अविनाशी मोनाड जीवन की पुस्तक में उस जीवन के पन्ने को अक्षुण्ण न पाए, ऐसा कोई कारण नहीं है। थैंक यू। नमस्ते।
Thank you, Meenakshi ji. Thank you, Vibha ji. It was a wonderful interpretation. Actually, जो letters हम लोग पढ़ते हैं और सुनते हैं, समझते हैं, उसमें हमारे एक reflection होता है, हम life में क्या कर रहे हैं, क्या समझ रहे हैं. And I think this kind of sessions when we conduct, it gives us some inner message to reflect on, to take back from these sessions. So there's only, we have got just 5 minutes left. Anyone would like to have any specific query on it? Whatever comes to your mind, you want to clarify from our speaker, any portion which was not very clear, then we can read that on the chat if you can put it. Or any additional comments. I hope you would allow some additional comments to Vibha ji, if there is any.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Any point
Yes.
of discussion, anything which you would like to share, something which you would have practically experienced?
Yeah.
This is a very
Because
good
this is the
forum.
last part of the letter, so I think we have got some scope to understand, like whatever we understood in the part 1 to part 4. Anything that is not very clear or you want to comment upon, anyone?
Basically, these letter number 68, 69, and 70 A, B, and C. This was all together based on the after death states. As I mentioned in last time also, that the Devachan letter, which was letter 68, and now these special cases which were taken, suicide victims and accident victims, and even victims who receive death penalty. So what is their state after death? All this has been clarified in letter 69 and 70. So I think that's all then for today.
Yeah. Because, out of our personal experience in the surrounding, in family, and the stories we hear out from people, we accumulate a lot of queries. So when we read such literature, it gives us some bit of clarity, and I think it's good that we should go and spread also a bit of awareness in people.
True.
That's the task we should take on.
True. That is why
Yeah.
it is so important to understand these three letters clearly, because
Yeah.
see, so many times in our in general living, people tell, especially younger children, small children, "Oh, dharma jao, bhoot hai." People have this, children, especially youngsters, they have this kind of thing. Acha, bhoot bhi
Right.
kuch hota hai. But there's nothing like bhoot. You need to understand the 7 principles of man, what survives after physical death, and how reincarnation happens. So it is good if we understand it ourselves and then also spread this message to other people whom we know, so that they can also come out of this misconception.
Yeah. Thank you, both the speakers and people who participated. I'm sure each one of us, including me, are carrying some things from this today's session and from the last 3 sessions on this particular letter. We will keep on studying, keep on interpreting, keep on discussing, keep on asking in our upcoming sessions. Thank you all. So we will end with the closing prayer. Sarve bhavantu sukhina, सर्वे सन्तु निरामया, सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु, मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्. ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः. Thank you all. We are closing the session. Good night.
Thank you all.